So, good afternoon or good morning, actually, I should be saying, and welcome to another CEO series. I'm very pleased today to introduce a very smart guy who I've been kind of working with for a little while now, and on a very, very interesting and very quite different SaaS product. So, I won't be the person that kind of shares the detail of that because it's always better to come from the horse's mouth, isn't it? So, welcome to Tom Ridges. Tom is the CEO and founder of Herdify. And Tom, perhaps over to you to explain what Herdify is and how it's working.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, Simon. I'm not sure who the smart guy you mentioned is, but hopefully I can fill in for him. But yeah, as you say, I run day to day, and as the founder of Herdify, we're a behavioral analytics business, behavioral analytics SaaS platform for retail brands, and it's really about helping to understand their consumer. A lot of people talk about that. I think there's a lot of stuff talked about behavior. We've kind of got a unique angle to this, and we really look at where communities are formed around brands. And I don't mean online communities or your customers. I mean, the streets, the towns, the cities that people live in. And fundamentally that, we live in this digitally first world, but actually the biggest influence on anybody's behavior, on all of us, but if we think about the consumer lens, are the people that we hang around with, the people that we interact with, every day. So, this insight is typically hidden to brands because these things are happening at the school gate, at WhatsApp, in the gym, in the pub, so you can't see where this is happening. What we've effectively done is built a platform that makes it really easy for retailers to identify where these communities exist for their brands. So rather than just try and influence everybody, which is expensive and hard work, they can really kind of push on open doors and really get explosive brand growth by harnessing this behavior that's pent up and ready to go.
Yeah, and so just to give people a little bit of insight, then, sort of, what stage are you at? How many people are you employing? What's the kind of fundraising? Because obviously you're a fundraised, business, aren't you? So just give us a bit
Yeah.
of an overview of that journey so far.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of say we're not quite a startup, we're not quite a scale up. We've got a good bunch of customers with some good household names that we're working with. There's 8 of us in the business, including myself. The last round we raised 1.5 million, so not loads, but kind of enough to we're not at that sort of true scale up stage yet,
Yeah.
but we're certainly past the will people buy this? We're sort of trying to, tune that piece about who's the best person, which we'll talk a lot about it, but ICP is a really kind of a real complex thing. And we're sort of always on that, and I don't think we'll ever stop, right? But yeah, that's the stage we're at the moment.
And I think that probably brings us nicely, doesn't it, into the kind of the key, what's keeping you awake at night question at the moment, because I know you've obviously been doing a lot of work and go to market. And like you say, because you're inventing something that's genuinely new to market, that's been a tough process, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. It's I sort of laugh with the team a lot because what we're essentially talking about is most of us are herd animals. That's why we call ourselves Herdify. So the complexities of getting a new product to market is hard because most people want to follow, right? And it's only about 8 to 10% of us who go first. So when I look at what we're doing is we're sort of telling these brands that, hey, look, the best way to get consumers to find this 8 and 10%, and it's exactly the same problem we have as a startup, right? Because we're a new brand bringing a new technology to market. If Adobe or someone like that came to market and said, we've got this great new approach, everyone's going to be like, great, but we're bringing in a brand new approach and a brand new brand, right? So in terms of the risk adverseness from humans, like we hit both of that. So we laugh, right? It's the science that we talk about for our customers, and it's the biggest point of inertia for us as a business. It gives me a good sort of thing when I talk to investors for the next round, because the same science that's slowing us down is once we hit our tipping point is what's going to give us our acceleration. So there's some great upsides. But that's it really. I think that's what is the thing that keeps me awake. It's almost, as I say, we've got some great early customers, those 8 to 10% who've seen the vision and they're genuinely innovators in their business. But it's how do we find that right audience? There's lots of audiences that this is applicable for. How do we find the best audience and the optimal audience that don't just buy with us but have a great experience and ultimately talk about us, right? Because we know that, it works in B2B, right? It's how we buy software. The more people who are talking and recommending us, we're going to grow. And it's that continual, are we speaking to the right people? Because the last thing you want, it's very easy, I think, in this role to go, we've got people that will buy this, let's go after them. But stepping back and saying, are they the right people?
Yeah.
And I think that's the piece that is always top of mind for me. Like, are we really talking to the right people? Are we really talking to the right people in the right way?
And the prioritization of that is always a challenge, isn't it? Because you're right, because your product, really serves a broad overview of the market. Actually, really, it's about prioritizing, where the kind of lowest hanging fruit is. And of course, being a behavioral science business, you're trying to obviously, understandably and correctly take that kind of, science-based approach to that. And it's not always easy to find that, is it?
No, exactly that. And you're right. There's also just what is there for the taking right now. As a good example, maybe in 5 years time we'll work in B2B, right? Because the same buy, consume people still buy products in business, but
Mm.
actually, we made that was our first pivot. We came out the gates, we were a B2B business. My background is in enterprise B2B businesses. So I was like, that's a familiar space, and we quickly realized that no, lower hanging fruit is consumer businesses, because they already think about human behavior a lot more than B2B businesses do. So you can't overthink it. Yes, it keeps me awake, and that's the thought. But you've also, what's in front of you that you can pick it.
Yeah, and I guess knowing now what you know now about going through that initial go-to-market, so like raising the funding, being in a position, that a lot of startup businesses would love to be, right? You've raised a decent round actually, considering how early you were. And then, the kind of the opportunity that creates is sometimes a blessing and a curse, right? Isn't it? Because for bootstrap businesses, they don't have that. So you kind of just have to work at the pace you're working at. But for you and for other well-funded businesses initially, obviously you can do all of it. So it is a prioritization kind of challenge. So I think if you knew now, if you know now, if you knew then what you knew now, would you have done any of the kind of the initial phase any differently, do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think so. I think, even if I'm sure everyone's read Lean Startup and all of those things that, you don't need a great product, and, you just need to get out to market earlier. And I think we actually did a fairly good job of that. But I still think we could have done that more, like less focus on the product early on. We could have incubated the different messaging a lot earlier,
Yeah.
and really run a lot more of those experiments. And as I say, that was something I was very conscious of anyway. Like, look, we don't want something really polished. You just need to be out there testing. It's a fine line, because I think buyers these days, want to see the product a lot sooner, than maybe before. But I still think we could have done that piece earlier. Also, probably trusting my gut a bit earlier, because I think even from day one, I was thinking this is going to land better with consumer businesses. But, I was like, well, I know the B2B space, I've worked for the likes of, Microsoft, these sorts of places, got networks. It's going to be easier in there. But actually, it was nothing to do with my network. It's where does the problem present itself in the loudest fashion, because the problem presents itself in the B2B world where I was comfortable, but my gut was saying for a while, we should start here, and that took us 6 months to figure out.
And
So yeah, I think just getting out the gate a bit quicker and listening to your gut is part of
yeah.
that for me.
And I think, from looking from the outside in, I think, one of the key lessons there is understanding where your solution is most measurable as well, particularly because you're impacting, kind of acquisition and performance, at least initially,
Yeah.
actually where in the markets where they have the best kind of ability to measure actual impact, I think makes your job easier, doesn't it? So that kind of realization, I'm sure, was quite a useful one.
Yeah, that's a big part of it for sure. Yeah, I think, how do people realize the value? But also there's, I think, also how to, thinking back to the behavioral side, how do people see it fitting in their story? B2B marketers, I think we all, I say that as one now. We like to think that there's a lot more logic that goes on in the B2B process, all the formal gates, and, you know, consumer, if you sell into consumers, you think a lot more about that. So yeah, how do you measure it? But also, how does it fit in their story? Because ultimately, when you're building new technology, you're already having to change people's mind. That's how big a behavioral change are you trying to get in with people. And try and do the smallest behavior change you can, unless you've got a lot of money and a lot of time.
Yeah, and if you think about the business broadly as a whole, and go,
Mm.
okay, so there's product, there's sales and marketing, there's kind of operational delivery, and perhaps there's customer success, customer service as well. Obviously, the customer success bit is less of a challenge for you at the moment because you're still relatively early. That comes later.
Mm.
But if you were to take those three or four kind of areas, in what order of difficulty would you put them for your kind of business? Like where do you feel like it's been most difficult to get traction? Is it with product, with like back office, with sales and marketing?
I think it's probably been in the sales part of it. I'm a tech guy by trade anyway, so the product side of it comes a bit more naturally. That in itself, I think, is a big learning for me as well. Like, as humans, we like to default to our familiar ground, right? So in early stages, it's quite easy for technical people to say, well, let's look at the product. And as I said, I think I'm pretty good at pulling my head up out of that, but it's certainly something that, tech founders can be very guilty of. So, refocusing my lens to be, to the commercials side, but also, as I said, because it's a new product and a new brand, trying to get traction. If you go to someone and say, look, we're building Airbnb, but cheaper, faster, better, right? They can instantly get it and go, okay, fine. I sort of see what you're doing, yay or nay for me. But we're having to go in and educate that, hey, there's a whole new concept that you've never known about, and we're coming from a company. And I think that's been the biggest challenge. Which now we've got through, right? We've iterated many times through that, but I think that was the bit probably would have spent more time in it at the beginning. Um, Planning it's maybe the wrong word, but I think I didn't realize how big that bit was going to be of that first sort of 12 months, if you like. Just getting people to go, well, just telling our story to a point of, people going, I get it, because you flip from, we've got some hugely complex science in our business, right? We're effectively flipping pandemic modeling on its head. So early days, people were going, well, this sounds really clever and you guys sound really clever, right? And that's not a compliment, because if a customer says that, they're saying we don't understand, so we're going to politely back away from the conversation. Okay, so we were first too technical and then we went too high level of like, we're going to help you grow. And they're like, well, everybody says that. How are you different, right? So as a new business with a new product, managing that pendulum, that was probably bigger challenge than building the science and getting all the other pieces done. I'm sure our data science team would disagree, but from my lens, exactly, at least it was getting that piece from the customer.
Yeah, and it's worth probably because there's some assumed knowledge here, isn't there, a little bit? So it's worth just perhaps giving those watching, listening, a bit of a real world example of how Herdify is helping somebody. Perhaps one of your clients. You don't have to name them, of course, but if you can give a generic view of exactly how you are helping them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll use the example of a subscription services company. It's just top of mind because we just got their results this morning. But they're actually looking to use door drops as a medium for this. And like everybody who's putting stuff through the door, it's you have to put a lot through a lot of doors to get any response rates, right? Now, what we're effectively doing is saying, well, look, where you've got these communities, there's already people talking about you as a brand, recommending, referring you. Let's try and get something in front of them that stimulates their memory, right? They're familiar with you. You want something to come through the door and they go, oh yeah, that's who so and so uses, and they're more likely to buy it. That becomes self-perpetuating, and then they talk about it, and hence these communities grow. Um, and just from if we compare, standard targeting, if you like, to how we would do it, it looks like it's about sort of 40 to 60% up on standard targeting. So what that means is they get, 46 increase in kind of people buying things from them. So it's a great way to kind of target that stuff. But we're also having a conversation with a very similar brand about where do they put pop-ups, right? Because um, common strategy is put pop-ups or retail stores where there's lots of people, right? But I'm not sure about you, Simon, but when I walk down high street, I've normally got my head down. Everyone's got their own stuff going on. It has to take something familiar to snap you out of it. So again, rather than just say where's high footfall, let's put a store, in this location. And that might not be in the middle of a high street. It might not be in Oxford Circus, right? It might be that the Bullring in Birmingham might be the first place for you to go, or it might be unknown street in Cambridge might be the best place for you to put your first pop up. But it comes back to, let's understand where you're going to have some traction and grow. And even if that feels abstract, like, the example we always give to customers, it's how all the big tech companies grew, right? So if we take Facebook or Meta as they are now, Meta didn't just try and recruit 1,000 customers across North America, right? And that's pretty much what a retail business will do. Meta concentrated on building a community in one college, one university. When that hit saturation point, it was planting its own seeds, right? And they could look at it and go, well, where's the next busiest place? Right, let's focus on growing that. So rather than let's just try and recruit, we've got 300 million people as our potential customer, let's go up all of them with loads of spend and we'll go everywhere. They were very narrow. Now, whether that was a strategic marketing decision or not, but how they grew from those communities allowed them to effectively follow those seeds and follow those communities to become, well, we all know the size of them now, right? They're in every country pretty much. So it's exactly the same approach. Technology products work with it out the box. Retail just have to think differently, and that's where we sort of have come in and hopefully help some of these people hit that exponential growth. That's where we want to take people.
I think that's why it resonates, because it's genuinely a different approach to something that seems to have been tried to death, so to speak. That kind of targeting piece. And I think everybody is now looking for something different. And I think if it genuinely offers that, then I think it's got a very good future as we discussed. So it's exciting. Are you up for just very quickly a quick fire round just to kind of finish things off?
Yeah, go.
Okay, we'll start with the more difficult one. So, what are you the best in the world at? Always a good one to ask someone. As a founder.
What am I the best of the world at? I think I am very good at not panicking. Like, don't get me wrong, when things go wrong, I'm not just sitting there very relaxed, but I also can step back and see the big picture and generally understand that most problems aren't catastrophic. My even in my personal life, my wife laughs. I generally see problem as an opportunity. There's always something good that can come out of it. And I think as a founder, there's a lot of problems, and they're not all catastrophic, but a lot of people with any small problems just go off the rails. I think what's kept me going is just the ability to look at them, evaluate them, and realize that that's serious, but it's not going to be fatal for the business. We can push through that, or there is a solution to this.
Yeah.
Well, so far we've always found them, and I think that's just a super important piece for me.
Calmness and resilience is great. So, and I guess that kind of brings us nicely actually onto the final question, which is, what sort of 3 or 4 kind of really key attributes would you say, if you're trying to advise somebody that's thinking about becoming a founder for the first time, what would you say are the key attributes that they should really possess?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I took a lot longer to get on my founding journey because there's always something I'd wanted to do, but I'm quite an introvert. I have to work quite hard at the extrovert, and I'd read so much stuff about you can only be a founder if you're really extrovert and really loud and really good at all of these things that I wasn't. And I think that's my first characteristic is um, listen to yourself. If you think if it's of interest to you and you think you want to do it, I think that's as big a driver, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. There's a lot of stuff written out there, frankly, by I think people who've never run a business.
Yeah.
But actually, if you're driven and you want to do it, you don't have to be an extrovert. You can find people to support you in those roles. And likewise, if you're an introvert, the other way, you can always find people to find it. So I think the first piece for me is just believing that you want to do it. But then very closely linked to that is resiliency. Just getting up. You're going to get knocked to the floor a lot, and some of them might be gentle taps, some of them might be a smack to the head. But actually, if you just get up and keep going, I sort of say to people, like, so it's just taking the next step. As long as you take the next step, good or bad, then you're still going to keep moving down the journey. And I think the final one for me really is then not celebrating the highs too high, because I think that helps you realize the lows aren't too low. If you get really excited with the highs, the lows feel really low and hard to come out of. Whereas if you can sort of maintain an equilibrium through them, sure, the highs make you feel a bit better, but actually, if you're kind of clever with that, the lows don't pull you down so much. And it's got to the stage now where I almost dislike good things happening because I know a bad thing's coming, right? But it's not a bad one. But we look that far ahead, and it's like, well, lows always follow a high. Likewise, a high always follows a low. So if you can keep that and not over exaggerate in each one, you can generally maintain a lot more consistent energy, and that helps with point two, the middle one, which is just allowing you to keep taking steps forward. Some days otherwise you just wouldn't. You think, no, it's too hard, I can't be bothered. But I think businesses that win are the ones that just stayed in the fight, I think, fundamentally.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. The resilience and time in market is not to be underestimated. It's a very good advice. And thank you, Tom, for joining us. It's been really, really insightful. And obviously, I wish you, all the luck with the kind of the
Thanks.
wave that's coming. Just in case anybody wants to follow you and stuff, do you want to? How's the best way of reaching you?
Yeah, so website is for anything Herdify, so www.herdify.com. It's Herdify. I'm relatively active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there, Tom Ridges. Or my email is just tom@herdify.com. Always happy to chat to people, founders if they've got questions. So yeah, ping me there.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks for your time, Tom.